Hi, I'm Jesus. Gonna give you a little history lesson here about Christianity in Russia. Because these two boys here, Mark and Austin, did a nice little project on Christian symbolism in this book. I mean, we got Raskolnikov killing people. That's a no-no in my book. Then we got Sonia acting all Mary Magdalene type of stuff. So we're gonna take you a little ways back here to Prince Vladimir, who first brought Christianity to Russia in 988 AD, after me. So, alright, you ready? AD 98 is conventionally regarded as the year that Christianity came to Russia. People as the religion of realm. However, before Vladimir's option for Christianity, there existed among the Russian Christians communities and rulers. First mention of the Rus people occurs in 17th century Arab chronicles, describing them as a warlike nation with an eye for trade. It goes on and on. We created the Byzantine Empire. So, page 1 done. Alright, however, Christianity was far unknown to Russia before 988. Indeed, the tradition of the Russian Orthodox Church has it that hilltop upon the city of Kiev, which is now present-day Ukraine, would later arise, was visited by the Lord's disciple St. Andrew. The story of St. Andrew, as the first evangelizer of Russia, most likely belongs to the realm of pious legend, a legend which, however, had an effect on the popular choice of the name Andrew, among Kievan princes and notables. Alright. Historically, the most important event to have consequences for the taking root of Christianity in Russia was the evangelism mission undertaken by the Greek brothers, the Balkans, and the Kirill, and the Methodius. The ancient Russian realm, centered around the city of Kiev, displayed the measure of religious tolerance toward its inhabitants. During the reign of Igor, there is evidence that Christians played a full role in the life of fledgling Russian state. The primary chronicle indicated that they are active in the prince's army and administration. Olga, however, Olga was his stepmother. She traveled with her suite to Constantinople, which is present-day Turkey, most probably in 946 AD, to entreat favors from Constantine VIII. Constantine VIII actually gave us lots of Christianity in Eastern Europe in the time period after my death. Moving on. With Olga's pagan son, Stanislav, it's just like the book, all these Christian names, we're going to call him Sissy, inherited the throne of Kiev. Attempts were made to convince this ferocious warrior to convert, but no avail. I would be the laughing stock of my retainers, he rejected. So Kievan Russia experienced something of a pagan revival in the 10th century, a revival continued by Shistaslav's son, Vladimir. And moving on, the Russians come in Rome, and the Pope tries to step in, and all the crusades come in, and the Pope says, I can't really help you. And the Russians are saying, come on, we want to be Christians, you know? We want to be like that Jesus guy. So Russia had been transformed from a pagan country with Christian communities to a Christian state, yet with a strong resistance to parting with old paganism. This dual faith of coexistence of Christianity and paganism in medieval Russia would continue to plague the church's mission in centuries to come. Later, chronicles would relate uprisings of pagan sorcerers, magicians, and witches against the Christian church, while Kievan Christian priests, regularly in their sermons, doubted the practices of the Christians. And then we move on. Finally, the period here, in the Byzantine period, followed by Prince Vladimir's death in 1015 AD, was one of the violent successions to the throne of Kiev. The first Christian ruler of Russia had left no system by which his kin would become rulers. His son Boris and Gleb died as passion bearers, showing Christian serenity in the face of violent death at the hands of their half-brother. We're going to come back to him, Sissy. Sissy's back again. The cursed. Boris and Gleb were for the humanly when conformed, and the evil destiny in their example has been upheld as an image of peculiar, canonic type of Russian Christian spirituality, whereby evil is conquered not through pragmatism or forced response, but by self-emptying to the point of death. Alrighty, now we're going to move on to another ruler, Yaroslav. Call him, his name's pretty easy, so we'll just call him Yaroslav. Later called the Wise, ruled from 1015 to 1054. It was during his reign that the church in Russia grew at a pace far outstripping that of Vladimir. If under Vladimir the churches numbered no more than a few dozen travelers to 11th century Russia, reported that Kiev alone boasted 600 churches. You know, Christianity is starting to spread and churches are starting to arise in the land of Russia. The reign of Yaroslav saw the first rapid flowering of Christian culture in Russia. Now, we come to the Mongols, their invasion. In 1227, at the frontiers of the vast realm of Cuban Russia, there appeared the eastern people that would wreak devastation upon the Russians for the next century and a half, the Mongols. In a sense, the Mongol invasion contributed to the preservation of the Byzantine character of Orthodox Christianity in Russia, preserving the Russian Orthodox way of Christianity. The 13th century was the time of the most violent crusades organized by Latin Christendom against the Greek Orthodox in the Levant. Now, the most numerous of the Orthodox people, the Russians, were kept in gangs by the Mongol Khans. The Pope of Rome saw it fit to organize Swedish and Teutonic knights to crusade against the weakened Orthodox. Now, people are starting to turn on Russian Christianity. It was a young prince of Novgorod, Alexander Nevsky, that organized the defense of Russia lands against the Western invaders, the most spectacular battle being fought and won by Alexander at Lake Chub in 1242. And we go on to the invasion. The invasion continues. And now we get to Sergius. We'll call him Sergio. After Sergio's death in 1392, Russia witnessed an extraordinary renaissance in both the inner and outward life of the Christian church. The early 15th century saw the emergence of the characteristic onion domes. Fast back here, if you go to Mount Carmel, you can see these domes there. They got a big Russian Orthodox church in Mount Carmel. Back to the Russian history lesson. While masterpieces of iconology of Adrian Rublev, Theophanes the Greek, and Daniel Corney adorned cathedrals and churches and dioceses that grew across the length of breadth of Muscovite Russia, also known as Moscow. The church's mission reached as far as the Ural Mountains with the evangelization of Fingo-Ugric peoples, especially the Syrians, whose language Saints Stephen and Perm had translated to the Gospels of Divine Liturgy. Where I just described is Western Russia, where Moscow and St. Petersburg are. Not Moscow, St. Petersburg. And then we go to Constantinople. You know how we talked about that guy Constantine? Well, he's back again. Yeah, we got his village down here. He's got the Turks. That's why it's called Turkey now. In 1453, he compelled the Russian Church to seek a new identity for itself, because they weren't too happy with the way a Russian Orthodox was going on here. After what the Russians perceived as apostasy by the Greek Church of Constantinople by concluding a union with the Church of Rome and Florence, later repudiated by Constantinople, the Russian Church now viewed herself as the primary, if not sole guardian, of the purity of the Orthodox Christian faith. And we move on. We're getting closer and closer to the time period when this book was written. By the 18th century, the Muscovite period of Russian history had wanted and had been eclipsed by the spectacular reign of Peter I the Great. Peter was fully aware of the church's potential political influence and acted as benefice and secularizing statesman. He abolished the institution of patriarch and replaced it with the essential college, later called the Holy Synod. Perhaps the most disastrous consequence, though, of this new arrangement was the confiscation of monastic lands holding during the reign of Catherine the Great, and the severe restrictions placed upon these wishing to pursue a monastic vocation. So if you wanted to be a monk, You couldn't. If you want to study Christian, you couldn't. You couldn't do any. You were done. They didn't like it. So now we go into the writings. People decided they were going to start writing. So we got Lev Tolstoy, Nikolai Gogol, and Fyodor Dostoevsky. Doesn't he sound familiar? Huh? Fyodor? And the philosopher Vladimir Solovyov all received counsel during this time period. Now we're going to talk a little about this Dostoevsky fella that we know so much about because we're in Miss Taylor's AP English class and we just know everything. Readers of Dostoevsky, the brothers Karamazov, will acquire an accurate picture of the monasty and its holy men. The writer was consoled by St. Armasov of Optima after the death of his 3-year-old son. As these monks were trying to practice, they couldn't practice. And Fyodor, he wrote about him. And he said, this isn't right. So now we're going to talk about a saint. The greatest saint of this age, Seraphim of Sarov. His spirituality, like that of Sergio, 6 centuries earlier, focused on internal prayer and compassion for the poor, combined with spiritual insight and guidance. It is, however, an indication of the divorce between church and culture that had occurred in Russia by this time, that has greatest holy man, Seraphim of Sarov, and the greatest poet, Alexander Pushkin, were unaware of each other's existence. And now we go into the 19th century. The Russian Orthodox underwent a vast expansion with the foundation of Serbia and Far East and flourishing missions as far ahead as China, Japan, Alaska, and even the American continent. Epitomizing this outreach of the church was a metropolitan. It was grand, it was vast. Russian Orthodox was spreading. It was spreading. Now we're going to get into the year 1905, when the Russian Revolution brought with a decree of religious tolerance, allowing for greater freedom of discussion within the church, and in the end, persecution of the believers. And then, my friends, we come to communism. Communism proved no rule in Russian Orthodox. So we're going to wrap this up. And the war between religion and Orthodox Christianity, in particular in communist ideology, had been won. The church emerging as victors in the struggle, and the incumbency of Moscow and all Russia had heralded a rebirth of the Russian Orthodox Church. The Christ the Savior Cathedral had been raised from the ashes, parishes and monasteries had been returned and are being renovated, with the onion domes that are so prominent. A rebirth. That's what it is. It's a rebirth. For 1,000 years, the Christian faith of the Orthodox Church had shaped the culture and statehood of the Russian people, which is now where we can make connections while we read.